Nightmare Alley is directed by Guillermo del Toro and stars Bradley Cooper, Kate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, William Dafoe, and among others. And in this story, it deals with Bradley Cooper, who is a drifter that comes into this town, this carnival, that he gets a job enlisted by William Dafoe's character, who he essentially starts to gain the knowledge of essentially trying to con people into knowing like they're like basically mind reading them in a way. And as it goes along, he starts to fall in love with Rooney Mara's character, and he eventually runs into Kate Blanchett's character, who's a psychiatrist, who starts to unravel a lot more about him and use it to her own way of getting into a plot that deals with some dark stuff that happens later on in the film that I won't go into too much detail about. Now here's a little backstory. Now this is a film that was directed by Guillermo del Toro, who I've been a very big fan of. When I was a kid, I remember watching Mimic, and it wasn't until years later I found out that he actually directed that film. And I know that movie's been tampered by the studio and everything, and it's really much disowned from del Toro. But I remember enjoying that film when I was a kid, and that was my introduction to him. And then ever since he started doing movies like Blade 2, Hellboy, and all that, I've got to really get a kick out of him as a filmmaker and the worlds that he sets up with all the dark, imaginative things, and a lot of admiration for his love for H.P. Lovecraft and things like that. And so I've always loved a lot of his movies that he's done over the years, and there's some I still haven't like fully completely watched. Like I've seen most of Pan's Labyrinth, but I haven't watched the whole thing. And there's some of his other stuff that he did before, I think before Blade 2 and all that I still haven't watched either, from like the 90s that he did. So there's still some other ones I need to get to, I just haven't checked out. But from his last film that he did, from Shape of Water, that I really loved, I was really looking forward to this, and I found out that the movie was actually based on a book, apparently, that came out in 1946, which I haven't read, but I also heard that it had an adaptation of its own that came out in 1947, which I haven't really heard much about that one, or seen it. And so if anyone's ever has read the book or watched the original movie, let me know in the comments of if those are any good, and let me know more about them. And so looking from the trailers, I got really interested in this because I really got into the whole like kind of carnival thing that they were going for. And the trailers kind of make it seem like it's going for more of a psychological kind of aspect, where it seems like Bradley Cooper's character is essentially suffering from like dreams and things like that. And that's where I thought the actual title came from, but it apparently becomes a lot more bigger things than that, and it's not really what the trailer makes it believe into. It becomes more of a film noir type of aspect that gets into some pretty dark territory as the movie goes along. And after upon seeing the film, I can honestly say this was definitely one of the best movies of the year for me, and certainly the best Del Toro movie I've seen since The Shape of Water. And to get my pros out of the way, I love the cast in this. I thought Bradley Cooper was fantastic. I've always liked Bradley Cooper as an actor, and I think that the way that he plays it off in this, it really shows a lot of his descent into his spiral into becoming pretty much a recluse as it goes along, where he's become an alcoholic and things like that. And the way that the movie's essentially becoming pretty much like he's getting a rise out of it, but then it slowly transcends into something a lot more darker, a lot more vicious path as it goes along. And I really got a kick out of his character, the way it played out, and he did a fantastic job in it. And I really got to appreciate his chemistry with Kate Blanchett in this. As Kate Blanchett, her character, the way that she's trying to get into his mind and everything, it became very fascinating with how they're having their sessions back and forth. And when they get into this other plot that goes into the middle half of the film, it becomes a lot more, it becomes a lot more contriving with how they're trying to set certain things up that later fall into play in the third act, that when it gets to its third act, it does get quite shocking. And Del Toro does a fantastic job with having up this world like set up and everything, especially with the carnival world that really gets into some pretty unsettling territory that involves with some of the freaks and everything that are there. And not going to go into detail, but let's just say there's something they actually foreshadow that's from the beginning of the movie that comes into play with the ending that I found very fascinating. And it made me kind of I really loved the ending of it, but it felt like it was a very kind of a downer too. but after really upon really thinking of it, it really got me and how it really played out with it. But to get my other pros out of the way, like we're saying, going back to earlier, the cast and all this were fantastic as usual. William Dafoe, I thought, had some funny moments here and there that I thought really worked, especially in the beginning. And it's great seeing other cast members that come back in this, like that are known for working with Del Toro, like Ron Perlman. It's great seeing him working back with Del Toro again. I haven't seen him, in a movie in a while, and I really enjoyed him here as like the strongman of the group and everything. And I got also the way that the movie played out with some of its like shocking twists and turns, especially in the third act, that really came out of left field that I didn't really call at all. And there are some I really enjoyed the film noir aspect that Del Toro was going for with building up this world with him getting into like trying to trick people and everything, and just the way that the little ticks here and there of where he's, where Bradley Cooper's really trying to get into people's minds, it becomes unpredictable for me because I was really wondering where it was going in the next. Now, if I had to get into anything else, I will say that to get into some of my cons, if I do have any cons, I will say is that the movie does feel like it does kind of take a slower pace toward the second half to where I'm still invested with it, but it does feel like it really slowed the movie down a little bit to where it's not as like high energy and very, in compelling compared to the first half. But it does pick up a lot more toward when we get toward the third act of it. And so that second half is really more of the kind of the downer beat that really kind of messes with the pacing. But it didn't really ruin it for me because they really did pay off with it in the end. And the other thing is that some of the characters that we get introduced from the beginning of the film, I really felt we could have came back more on them again, especially with William Dafoe and the rest of the Carnival group. And a lot of it felt like there wasn't really much of a resolution that was really going on with them, or really much like development, so to speak, with their characters. Now, the other thing too I will mention is that Rooney Mara's character, while I do enjoy her performance, I do admit that there's certain things that they could have really spent more time to really get to know with her character, because as the movie goes along, when she gets involved with Bradley Cooper, it seems like it's very like kind of tacked on to where we don't really much know about their time together, and it just feels very rushed. But those are just some like minor little things that didn't really hold the movie back, because I was still very invested with how the movie goes along with its story, and it really played out into some really dark like stuff and territory that really caught me off guard, especially when we get into some characters that are introduced later in the film. But overall, though, I will say that this is definitely one of the best movies of the year for me, and despite any of the minor issues I did have, it really grabbed me a lot, and it really laid me a lot of very good way of storytelling and visual storytelling as well with the way Del Toro works with this. And I'm going to give the movie a phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who've also seen Nightmare Alley and also read the book and seen the original film that's based on, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.